Chosen one, step into this moment, because it was always yours. Look around. You're not just here by chance. You're here because you've endured, because you carry something no one else can duplicate. This isn't just another chapter. This is the part where everything changes, and you are the reason why. To everyone watching, feeling that fire in your chest, lean into it. You've already walked through storms that would have crushed others. You've already proven, quietly, painfully, and beautifully, that you were built for more. And now, it's your turn to take up space, to own the light you thought you had to shrink from. You are not ordinary. You are not forgettable. You are not here to play small. You are the spark they can't put out, the shift they didn't see coming, the force they'll never be ready for. So take a breath. Stand tall. This moment is not asking you to fit in. It's begging you to show the world exactly why you were chosen. Let's go. Underneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing, unassuming yet undeniable. The craft was not learned overnight, but honed through quiet vigilance, like someone tracing the constellations while everyone else was dazzled by city lights. Attempts to derail the progress only sharpened its edge. The more resistance applied, the clearer the path became. In human behavior, there's a curious twist where the very effort to dismantle someone ends up reinforcing what they stand for, a silent irony written into every outcome. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Schemes unfolded, voices tangled in hushed corners, intentions cloaked in feigned concern. Yet nothing swayed the course. Each attempt to obscure the way only illuminated it further, as though the universe itself conspired to turn obstacles into markers. While others rehearsed speeches and played to their audience, the plan moved forward without spectacle, inevitable and unshaken, leaving those who plotted momentarily still, as if struck by a sudden blackout at the height of their act. Illusions of defeat were allowed to linger deliberately, a quiet permission granted so others could reveal their entire play before the final turn. And then, almost effortlessly, the conclusion came. Not loud, not cruel, just inevitable. Around the room, you could almost hear the weight of realization settle, like glass cracking under pressure. The entire charade fell apart while its architects stood where they had always been, patient, prepared, holding the very thing others thought they had taken. The mask of meekness was never genuine, but rather a calculated choice, the opening move of a much longer game. First impressions were quietly rewritten, while false confidence in others grew unchecked. Every dismissive gesture, every whispered slight became a breadcrumb, a map revealing where alliances truly lay. Observations piled up silently, and when the time was right, the map was complete, a perfect record of their own undoing. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Quiet restraint was not born of doubt, but of discipline. While others hustled for the spotlight, shouting over each other for scraps of recognition, the real work continued behind closed doors. Where others sought quick applause, deeper foundations were laid, roots extending into ground too deep to see. Those who confused calm for weakness did not realize that storms never announced themselves. They gave away everything they wanted to hide in their hurry to be seen, while the one they overlooked prepared without needing an audience. When the curtain finally rose, what had been protected all along emerged undeniable, and those who misjudged it could do nothing but watch. Patience outpaced noise. That's why the outcome tilts so heavily now. While others sprinted for fleeting cheers, chasing after the next sparkle to keep themselves visible, the entire approach leaned into a different rhythm entirely. Their hunger for recognition wore them thin, as every move they made became a desperate signal to be acknowledged. Bright displays and loud declarations became their currency, but it was all spent too fast. Every glance they stole, every shallow accolade only deepened their dependency on the next one, leaving little of substance behind. In the quiet, an entirely separate architecture rose, unseen at first, but steady. Nothing about it hurried. It refused to bow to the urgency of appearances. The work sank deeper, meant to endure instead of impress. Each step aligned with permanence, not applause. While the others paraded around, mistaking visibility for victory, the preparation continued where no one was watching. Through long nights and quiet choices no stage could ever capture. that stillness wasn't neglect. It was an intentional investment into something immune to collapse. What looked like absence was really strategy, allowing others to mistake volume for progress. Depth replaced display. When their moment came to hold the center, they found themselves grasping at a tension that no longer wanted them, while the quiet momentum finally emerged, unhurried, unshakable. Nothing here was the product of luck or spectacle, only the resolve to build something beyond reach of a single season. That's why when the light shifted and the crowd fell silent, the one who had been overlooked stood firm, not because they played to the crowd, but because they never needed it to begin with. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Clarity became the shield, and restraint became the most potent move of all. Nothing was given away freely. Every revelation was measured, every glimpse intentional. No one was entitled to the full truth. Only fragments were allowed to circulate, fragments chosen carefully to protect what mattered most. Assumptions worked in favor of a plan, giving others the false confidence they needed to miscalculate. They called what they didn't understand weakness. They called the silence uncertainty. But all the while, space was being carved out behind the scenes. Misjudgment bought time. Distraction kept them chasing shadows, unable to disrupt what they couldn't name. Meanwhile, the real progress continued beyond their view, untouchable. By the time reality caught up, the curtain had already dropped on their performance. The pieces they thought they were playing with no longer fit the board. What they'd mistaken for hesitation was precision, and what they'd labeled retreat was just distance. Every withheld word, every unanswered provocation, every quiet move had been deliberate, protecting something that could never be reduced to their understanding. And now, all that remains for them is the hollow echo of their own noise, while the one they underestimated stands in silence, undeniable. Every maneuver they thought would break resolve instead became another layer of insight, not just surviving their designs, but decoding them completely. Their assumption was fragility, imagining that defeat had already taken hold. What actually happened was a meticulous study of their behaviors, each ploy cataloged like specimens under glass. Manipulations turned into a map, and every feigned kindness or sharp jab became another clue to their patterns. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. In the silence between confrontations, the entire architecture of their tactics unfolded clearly. The false sympathy, the deliberate omissions, the way they banded together to prop up illusions, all of it became transparent. What they believed was subtle coordination revealed itself as nothing more than a predictable rhythm, one that could be anticipated and dismantled. And when the pieces were finally understood, the response was not resistance, but redirection, transforming what was meant to corner into a way out entirely. They never noticed the quiet calculations happening in plain sight. While they congratulated themselves on temporary control, the rules were being rewritten. Not 1 ounce of energy was wasted on their theater. It was all invested into something entirely outside their reach. When the moment arrived to act, nothing they'd relied on, the guilt, the confusion, the noise, had any effect. The system itself was cracked, dismantled, and replaced before they realized it had even happened. And in the spaces they mistook for surrender, a different kind of strength was quietly taking shape. Silence was not an absence, but a shield, keeping intentions out of reach. Nothing was given away carelessly. Everything stayed layered, beyond what they could infer or intercept. They filled the air with their conclusions, projecting weakness onto what they couldn't decipher. But beneath the quiet exterior was a complexity they weren't equipped to handle. The restraint that baffled them became the key to everything. In stillness, plans matured unseen. Layers of intent were hidden in plain view, impossible to unravel. By the time realization dawned, the shift was irreversible. Whatever they thought they controlled had already slipped through their hands, and the silence they mocked had already transformed into a fortress. What they assumed was hesitation was protection. What they thought was emptiness was actually a sanctuary where the next chapter was written. Now, Confronted with the outcome they never predicted, they stand disoriented, unable to trace how the ground moved beneath them while they were too busy listening to themselves. What they didn't count on was the quiet certainty that turned their schemes into nothing but echoes. Retaliation was never necessary. The transformation itself spoke volumes where words would have fallen flat. Expectations of collapse, of frantic retaliation, of spiraling into their chaos all dissolved as calm progress replaced every scene they tried to orchestrate. What arrived in their place was not noise but undeniable presence, a reality too large for their distortions to obscure. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They waited for reaction, clung to the idea of confrontation, expected fury or breakdown to validate their narrative. Instead, what answered was absence of conflict, replaced by a rising clarity they couldn't dismiss. Their distortions remained unchallenged, not because they deserved to stand, but because they were rendered irrelevant by the evidence unfolding beyond them. No corrections were made, no arguments indulged, only steady building of a truth no rumor could erase. Every step forward became a quiet dismantling of what they'd crafted against you. What they thought was buried returned more vivid than ever, and each milestone left them speechless, questioning the story they'd invested in. The growth became the contradiction to every accusation, every whispered falsehood. With each elevation, with each refusal to shrink or even look back, the hold of their lies weakened, until even their allies began to doubt them. And all along, no names were spoken, no energy wasted on proving points. Just one undeniable fact remained. What stood in front of them could not be dismissed. Without force, without spectacle, without lowering to their level, the quiet assent became the loudest answer imaginable, a revelation that left no room for their version to survive. Not revenge, but resolution, and that carried more weight than any battle ever could. From the very start, they never realized the moves ahead of them were already set. Every shift in their behavior, every subtle betrayal, every attempt at control was already accounted for long before it showed itself. Patterns revealed themselves in plain sight to anyone who bothered to truly watch, but they mistook observation for ignorance. The false kindness, the staged whispers, the deliberate missteps they assumed went unnoticed instead painted a perfect map. Every strategy they rehearsed so carefully had already been anticipated, cataloged, and understood. Their tests became irrelevant, their traps transparent, their betrayals predictable, and all the while they mistook composure for being caught unaware. They pushed forward as though victory was imminent, failing to see that their own actions had already turned the tide against them. Nothing they attempted came as a surprise, nothing caught unprepared. Even as they piled on with greater urgency, it only further exposed how fragile their foundation truly was. Patience allowed them to believe in their advantage, just long enough for their own missteps to collapse beneath them. Not because of interference or direct opposition, but because time itself peeled back their facade. What they thought was winning was just them racing ahead of themselves, while every weakness became impossible to conceal. And by the time realization arrived, it was too late to adjust. The silence they mistook for defeat had been calculation all along, letting them write their own downfall without even noticing. What unfolded wasn't revenge or even confrontation, just a quiet unveiling of what had always been inevitable. There's a rare kind of strength in learning what others refuse to look at, and you carry it now. Not because you were trapped in the dark, but because you knew the answers were hidden in the places most people avoid. Where others flinched at the weight of betrayal, jealousy, and deception, you stood still and let it reveal itself. You didn't crumble when the atmosphere shifted. You didn't retreat when the masks fell off around you. Instead, you paid attention. You caught the way false support disguised itself as care, the way smiles masked schemes, the way closeness could be used as a leash. You didn't just endure what was meant to break you. You unraveled it. You saw how affection could be used as a cage, how silence could punish more deeply than words, how charm could be sharpened into a trap. Every tactic became another lesson you memorized. None of it swallowed you, because you were never there to absorb it. You were there to understand it. You discovered that the shadows weren't just a threat, but a curriculum. Every harsh encounter became part of a blueprint you carried forward, piece by piece. They mistook your quiet for collapse. They assumed you were paralyzed, unable to navigate the chaos they stirred. But in reality, you learned how to step between their noise without letting it cling to you. They couldn't see that the more they revealed of themselves, the more your instincts sharpened. Now nothing shakes you. Now clarity cuts through what once clouded your path. You move like someone who has already walked through the wreckage and come back tempered, steady, unflinching. That insight unsettles them because it strips away the illusions they hide behind. Your movements now carry a kind of precision they can't predict, because you learned how to cut through deceit without carrying its weight. The same darkness they hoped would engulf you is now nothing but a faint echo in your wake. You didn't just survive. You became untouchable, a presence honed by what was meant to destroy you, and immune to anything that isn't real enough to stand. Some carry a weight they don't have to announce, and it unsettles everyone who believes power must be loud, while others scramble to be noticed, filling rooms with noise and demanding to be acknowledged. You moved differently, without forcing anything, without chasing anyone's approval. You carried something they couldn't name, but felt anyway. You never argued for space. You never performed for validation. You simply became a quiet force no one could quite place, and that confusion gnawed at them. They couldn't understand why you didn't flinch, didn't rush to prove your worth, didn't fall into their games. What they failed to realize was that control isn't found in domination, and strength doesn't tremble when it's tested. They thought respect came from intimidation. You knew better. You let your actions speak, kept your focus inward, and let time reveal what you already carried. Every moment they tried to overshadow, you only made your steadiness more visible. The silence that unsettled them grew louder than their shouting ever could. You became the unspoken shift in the room, the calm presence that exposed what they tried to hide, the stillness that made them stumble over their own illusions. They began to falter, not because you confronted them, but because your authenticity made their facades impossible to maintain. Their masks started to slip, their rehearsed confidence unraveling in the presence of someone who never needed to play their game. No stage was required, no spotlight necessary. You didn't climb on top of their noise. You let it collapse under its own weight. And when the dust cleared, they were left staring at someone they could neither discredit nor control. They never predicted that quiet could carry this much weight. But every fake story, every exaggerated rumor, every hollow attempt to define you has crumbled under the gravity of what you are. And the most remarkable part? You never had to raise your voice. Your presence spoke loud enough. The trap they designed revealed more about them than it ever did about you. They were certain their fabrications would corner you, that you would stumble under the weight of accusations and flail in protest. Carefully, they pieced together fragments, distorted words, and crafted an illusion meant to be convincing enough to turn eyes away. Whispered stories, carefully staged narratives, and convenient omissions painted a version of you they hoped everyone would believe. Yet nothing they expected happened. No frantic explanations, no desperate chase to be heard. Stillness became the response. No hurried denials, no scramble for validation, only patience. That quiet unnerved them more than any defense could have, because it denied them the chaos they craved. The louder they grew, the more tangled their version became. They mistook silence for surrender, not realizing it was calculation. As their claims grew more outlandish, cracks began to show. Their invention became too unwieldy to sustain. Inconsistencies surfaced, doubts began to spread even among those they thought they'd convinced. They leaned too hard into the performance, revealing their own obsession in the process. And then, slowly, what they built against you fell back on them. The same lies they clung to unraveled in their hands, exposing not just the falsehoods, but the desperation behind them. Where they intended to trap you, they instead revealed their own motives, their own fractures. It became impossible for them to keep pace with the very story they'd spun. Their contradictions piled higher, and the audience they once controlled began to see through the veneer. No confrontation was needed, no retaliation orchestrated. The truth stood on its own, dismantling their narrative piece by piece. The collapse of their scheme illuminated what they tried to hide, their own insecurity, their own weakness. What was meant to break you instead framed your strength in sharper relief. Without lifting a hand, without even raising your voice, the ground shifted beneath them, their strategy becoming their downfall. In the end, what they crafted became their undoing, while you rose beyond reach. Not as vengeance, but as quiet justice, inevitable, unforced, undeniable. There was something about your presence that unsettled them before you even spoke. Not because you accused or condemned, but because standing near you forced them to notice parts of themselves they worked hard to bury. No harsh words, no judgment, no demands. Yet their comfort dissolved the moment you entered. You didn't diminish anyone or parade superiority, but the quiet certainty you carried was enough to make their facades falter. Without effort, you revealed what they were avoiding, choices they regretted, courage they abandoned, principles they traded for approval. While they kept performing confidence, you lived it without spectacle, and that difference burned in ways they couldn't name. Your boundaries became a problem for them, not because they were unfair, but because they exposed how little they respected their own. Your self-belief looked like defiance through their bitter lens. Even your refusal to shrink seemed provocative to those who depended on others playing small. It was never about you directly. It was what you awakened in them. You reminded them of their compromises. You quietly embodied what they pretended to be, and that was unbearable to watch. The more authentic you became, the harder it became for them to keep their illusions intact. They didn't resent you for what you did. They resented the way you made it impossible for them to lie to themselves in peace. Your strength uncovered their insecurities. Your integrity disrupted their pretenses, and your calm turned their noise into something hollow. Rather than grow alongside what you revealed, they chose to turn against it. The tension wasn't created by you. It was born in their refusal to face what your presence reflected. In trying to diminish you, they only deepened their own cracks, breaking under the weight of what they refused to confront. What they see now is only the result. They'll never grasp the solitude it took to get here. The path stretched forward with no hands to steady you, no safety lines, no cheers from the sidelines. Every step was carried alone, with nothing but quiet resolve and a weight most wouldn't survive. The ones who claimed loyalty vanished when silence fell. Some even smirked at what they thought was your undoing, whispering their doubts while watching from a distance. They mistook your stillness for collapse, your solitude for surrender. But what happened in that space was something no onlooker could comprehend. While they kept count of your scars, they didn't notice what was being forged beneath them. They thought it was the end, but it was a metamorphosis in disguise. Each unseen struggle etched a strength into you that cannot be copied or borrowed. What was meant to break, you became the very thing that set you apart. When you emerged, they didn't recognize you. The quiet figure they dismissed now stood unshaken, carrying a presence that unsettled even the loudest of doubters. And now they return, trying to claim proximity, speaking your name as if they'd never abandoned it. But the truth behind their sudden admiration has nothing to do with love. It's the discomfort of realizing what your rise says about their absence. Your presence unmasks them. It reveals who chose to watch rather than stand with you. It reveals who celebrated too soon when you stumbled, who mistook your struggle for weakness and used it as their entertainment. Now that you move in clarity, they reach toward your light, hoping to escape what it reflects back at them. But this time, they can't skip to the ending they didn't help build. What you carry wasn't handed to you. It was earned in silence, through wounds they'll never understand. And now that you see who they truly are, no applause, no sudden loyalty can dim the certainty you've gained. That awareness protects what you've become, untouchable, unwavering, and radiant on your own terms. They were so sure of the outcome. They spoke of your collapse like it was already history. They outlined the downfall in vivid detail, reciting it like a prophecy they believed they authored. The assumptions were loud, their confidence louder, preparing their reactions in advance, building narratives that served their egos. To them, the ending was set, predictable, and neatly packaged without your input. What they never accounted for was that you were never following their version in the first place. While they performed certainty, you moved in silence. While they obsessed over your supposed limits, you dismantled them quietly, not to prove anything, but because they were never real to begin with. You allowed the story to unfold in their favor long enough for them to become careless with their claims. And then, without announcement, you rewrote everything they thought they understood.